Alejandro, there's this old trope that the Western colonizers, when they went all over the world, they didn't really take into account a lot of geography, cultural history when they drew the borders. They just sort of drew the borders wherever it suited them, and it's created a lot of problems because some ethnicities are forced to be together, some are divided, and so on. So here's the question. Is Peru's shape and current borders, is it reflective of anything? Did the colonizers create a Peru that has a logical reason to be, or are you just some sort of random fantasy from some Spanish king?
Actually, it does make sense because the borders were officially drawn by not by the colonizers, but instead by the previous empires that did exist prior to their coming. For example, you have the um, you have the Wari Empire, which already was being established over like in the Andes region, the Andes Mountains, and also part of the Amazon jungle, just like part that was really close to them, to their point where their empire was having its capital at the moment. Then after came the Inca Empire, as the empire known as the Tawantinsuyu, and their extension was basically from the south of what is today Ecuador up to the north of what is today Chile and part of Bolivia too. That was the organization that the territory organization that they had. It was done by the four charters of the map, like now north, south, east, and west, and so on. And then so the colonizers, the Spaniards, came later into South America, and they took over, of course, but they also took the what was already established over here and just mounted their own institutions and understanding over what was already here established. So it's not like they drew a map just on their own or whatever. It's not like this didn't happen like it was the case with the British Empire, for example, or the French Empire. It was they used what it already exists.
So in school, what do they preach to you about Peruvian identity? That you are the grandsons of the great Incan Empire?
Yes, in a way, but there is like two schools of thinking regarding that. For example, one side of which is the indigenista, no, indigenism, which is like their official ideology and such for one wing of the academy. They basically say that yes, that we are the grandsons and grandchildren of the Inca Empire, and the Spanish came us, did colonize us, and also they did destroy the culture and all that stuff. And there is the another side of that, which is the what we take in as inspiration, which says that uh, there is always going to be part of the Spaniards that is part of us, and there is always going to be part of the Incas and the indigenous and other cultures that did exist because it was an empire after all. It wasn't just the Incas. The Incas were like the dominant culture, but like for example, you had the Romans, you had also the Scythians, you had also like in the case of Rome, no, but
Mm-hmm.
in over here you had the Incas, you had the Canchis, the Cañaris, the Shan Incas, and so on and so forth. And it's like many, many cultures. So that's always going to be a part of us, whether we like it or not, or whether we deny it or not. It's always present, even in our vocabulary, in the way we describe things, even in some of part of the Andean philosophy, which is called philosophy, but it's like there is always a debate if the Incas did develop philosophy or not, or something like philosophy. But that's part of a debate within academia regarding that. So, but basically, is that no? That there are two schools of thinking, which is one is we are just the grandsons of the Incas, and the other side is more try to have a more comprehensive view of what an empire is and what the remnants of those empires, which after that point was the Spanish Empire. What what do those means to the identities that we have now, right now, today, in 2021?
So, how do people see themselves in Peru? In America, we have divided everything into race. Be you Cuban, Mexican, Colombian, and so on. You are Latino. That's just it. You are shoved into this block. Anyone who is African, be they someone who came from the ancestry of the slave trade, voluntarily from some other part of the world, or especially directly from Africa, black. Okay? So we divide everything by this racial group. In Russia, things are a lot more complicated because there are tons of different ethnicities that all sort of have their little region within Russia with a sort of greater Russian ethnicity sitting over it. So what does Peru look like? Is it closer to America? Is it closer to Russia? Or does it have its own sort of unique way of seeing different ethnic groups within itself? And does this breakdown of society have any effect on politics?
So it's a similar case to what you see in Russia. There is like the overarching Peruvian ethnicity, so to speak. Like, for example, mestizo, which is, for example, I would be me. I would be a mestizo, for example. But there is always like a more precise and try to be more regarding. I believe it would be regarding region, for example, because I am mestizo, yes, but I'm a mestizo from the coast and more specifically from Lima, Peru, while other people can be the same, but for example, from the northern coast of Peru or from the southern coast, or can be more mestizo from the Andes or from the Amazon jungle. Just so you see, it's more regional, more than being just racial or whatever. It's more it's due to more like for geographic and locations and all this kind of stuff, but there is an overall arcing Peruvian ethnicity overall, which is just like I said, there is like this core which is comprehended in by different people from academia, but different politicians even, that they say that basically what I just mentioned in the previous point, which is we are descendants of both empires, of the Incas and of the Spaniards. So we are basically, that's part of our core essence. But to that, you can add something else, which is that came with the newer waves of migrants. For example, you have also the African, for example, component, or the Asian component, or the all other European ethnicities like Italians, like for example Germans. No? There are remnants of that in the different cities that the descendants of these people do occupy. That is also a part of what we call now Peruvianness. No? And Peruvianness was defined or studied by many different authors, starting with let's say one of the basis of this, one of the first guys that took interest and defined this was the Inca Garcilaso de la Vega, which was the first person that recognized himself as Peruvian, part of the viceroyalty of Peru. He was a descendant of one of a Peruvian. Well, but by the time was the descendant of an Inca royalty, and also of a Spaniard, a Spanish royalty. So this man claimed that he was Peruvian. He was always going to be part of those both worlds, but at the same time, he was part of a new place, a new beginning, a new world. So he always mentioned that, and then that's the basis of that, and then the academia, people in the academia took over those ideas, and we also here in our Peruvian nationalist scene also take inspiration in that idea, and also yes, not to forget that that's part of the core of who we are and what we are, but it's not just that. It's just there is much more to it. But this is like the first, let's say the first level to understanding of who we are as a people.
You know, besides like the World Cup or the occasional color revolution, we really don't hear much coming from South America. So, are things in South America now kind of just cool and calm and peaceful and nothing is happening? Or is there stress between neighbors? Is there sort of a unseen great game going on in South America?
Well, right now is we have this tendency, this trend worldwide, no? That liberalism is becoming much more repressive, much more dystopian, much more aggressive towards native peoples in different parts of the world. By natives, I don't mean just people that are just from the Andes. I mean people that are essentially Peruvian, people that are Chilean, people that are even from the United States. You're seeing that right now, no? And in different other parts of the world, in Europe, that's something that is totally present in today's politics. And yes, so in that sense, we always have issues with politicians that are basically hyper liberals that want us to become uh, like our own version of the United States, so to speak, because and in their minds that will be much more helpful and much more easier for them to legislate and to dominate us. But the reason that they still have not achieved this is because we still have under some notion, perhaps not just as not as developed as I mentioned during this conversation, notion of who we are, a notion that trying to replicate other realities and other measures that have been positive, positive in the minds of these politicians and in other parts of the world. It's not going to be useful or here for us because we will react differently. For example, that's I don't know if you're familiar with this whole overall gender ideology. You know, the overall gender politics that is going on in the United States. I know that in Russia there is there are attempts to start doing that on behalf of globalists or hyper liberal politicians. Over here, there was also an attempt to legislate that, and that happened. That did happen with our neighbors in Chile, in Argentina, and even in places like Brazil or Colombia. But those are the main key points, the main issues that we have regarding problems in the region more than actual conflicts. We don't have any actual conflicts that like we used to do, like perhaps during the last century. There were different wars going on. For example, the Peruvian-Colombian War, the Peruvian-Equatorian War, the war with Chile. There was also the Falkland Islands, the Malvinas Archipelago conflict between Argentina and Britain, and we did help those guys out, and Chile wanted to invade them, and so we placed tanks around our border with Chile, so that if they moved against Argentina, we will move against them, and so that was a more convoluted and problematic situation, regarding our conflicts, no, but our conflicts right now are just social. We don't really have any issues with our neighbors, because I think that this, from what I have observed during my lifetime, with this situation, that the hyperliberals try to enforce us, trying to make us become something different that what we are, or that what we used to be. For the different countries, the different neighbors that we have developed a sense of solidarity between, for example, there was always like this rivalry between Peru and Chile, because of a long war that we had, because of different, mostly, let's say, um, issues when we have soccer matches and and those kind of things. But after the different the different social struggles that we have been experiencing, and political overall we have been experiencing during this last decade. I believe that we have gotten closer to them, and they have gotten closer to us, and that's the same could be said about other countries like Ecuador, Argentina, Brazil, even. Despite that we don't speak the same language, but Portuguese and Spanish is not like, it's not like, for example, talking Finnish and talking Norwegian. No? It's like talking perhaps English and I don't know, Canadian English, for example. It's something very like that. It's like very close. I can have an understanding and an actual conversation with a person that just speaks Portuguese, and a person that just speaks Portuguese can also have a conversation with people that only speak Spanish, and so that's helpful.
You mentioned that a lot of your politicians want to copy America. Now, is this some sort of expression of Washington having a dominant influence over Lima, or is there simply no other alternative ideologically, so that's what they have to push, because that's all there is?
So that's an interesting question, because the situation that we have over here is like mostly, it has been mostly that America has always, well, by America we're talking about the United States now, but normally when we mention in this part of the world, when we say America, we are always talking about the entire continent. We're always talking about us, in general. So that's an interesting phenomenon, no? That is not really well known in parts of the Spanish, of the English speaking world. But anyhow, yes. So regarding our politicians and all that, I think that during I believe it was during the 70s that we had a more independent country with General Juan Velasco Alvarado. He was a nationalist and a military man. He had a coup d'état against the social democrat government that was already in power back then during the 70s. So when he took over, he started to develop some very interesting nationalist ideas and nationalist curriculum for school education, public education, and so on. So it was an overall positive, in my opinion, overall positive experience. But the problem that we had was economic, no? And the issue with America controlling your country it's always due, at least in this country, it had always been due to economic, no? They always control different industries because we are more like an extractive primary resources country. We always extract those and send them to the superpowers or more developed countries, so they will transform those into products and they sell as a product. So that's how the relation between us and them work. So when we had issues, it was always with American companies. It was always like there is this really well-known situation between I believe it was El Salvador, no? Or Honduras that had the nation. No, sorry, Guatemala. It was with Guatemala when it happened, the phenomenon of the Banana Republic. So it was always that was always the situation between the United States and other countries like this one, no? And for example, an American sociologist and very respectful person in American academia, so it was an intellectual guy that was taken into consideration by the likes of Henry Kissinger and so on. named David Skull Palmer. He wrote that we cannot let Juan Velasco Alvarado do whatever he wants, because if we let that man run free, he will become a second Franco, a second Salazar. That's the kind of man you are dealing with. You are not dealing with a new Fidel Castro. You're wrong. You have to take him out of power. So that was one of the foundations for them to take Velasco out of power and take this, suppress the nationalist sentiment that did exist over there. And we had different issues regarding our own economics, because our own economy, because I said that, in the realm of economics, we didn't have a developed country. We didn't have developed industries at the moment. So we had different drawbacks from the policies that he wanted to implement. And after he was gone, after a coup d'etat by another man, which was he was also another military man, but he was more like, I wouldn't say he was more like a Pinochet, but probably he was more like close to Videla, the Argentinian guy. So but the name of the man that made a coup d'etat against General Juan Velasco Alvarado, was Morales Bermudez. So Morales Bermudez made this coup d'etat, and after that we had been completely economically dependent from the United States. But during the 2000s, with the coming of the then president Alejandro Toledo, what happened was that we were not just economically dependent from the United States, but now we are also going to start becoming more culturally dependent from them. There were different reforms that were aimed to change the mindset of the Peruvians. Were meant to change our own way of being, way of becoming. So that's when it started. Then it continued with the other presidents. Although it slowed down a little bit with President Ollantumala, but only slightly. Then it continued with the neoliberal president, and also he was a banker from that was at the time living in New York. Ex-president Pedro Pablo Kuczynski. He was our first, let's say, hyper liberal. And from them, we just continue the trend. But today we have an opportunity with President Castillo. Although the problems right now, it seems that this section of the academia, which are more close to the United States, they always go to, for example, to study their master degrees, to get their master degrees in the United States, and they come with these ideas from their own academia, which is like the colonial theory, gender studies, all this kind of stuff. These people are right now prevalent within our own national academia. So that's one of the problems that we have right now with the United States. By the way, we are not just the only country facing this across the region. This is like becoming more and more common. And also in other places like France, for example, the French president, who is a liberal, Emmanuel Macron, said that this idea of critical race theory was against the French notions, against French society in general. And I would say the same for this racial understanding of the world, that is also against the Peruvian standard of the world, which is totally different in many ways.
You mentioned ideology, and from what I understand, you're involved in something called chrysalism, which is, quote, a new political and philosophical awakening in Peru. But could you tell us a bit about this? So if rich young politicians are coming back from the Ivy League with all sorts of ideas about critical race theory, is chrysalism sort of Peru's ideological defense against that? What is this movement?
So basically, chrysalism is our own take on the fourth political theory developed by Professor Alexander Dugin, which Professor Alexander Dugin says that Dasein is part of the core of the fourth political theory, is its core subject, no? So basically, we take this understanding that yes, the Dasein of the Peruvian people, since we had become a group, a society, a group, a new country or whatever, what is Peruvianness that I did already explained early with the ideas of Inca Garcilaso de la Vega and among many different other Peruvian thinkers, like for example José Antonio del Busto Tuturburu, Fernando Fuensalida Bolmar, and many different other thinkers. We also take this notion that Professor Dugin said that it's like, I don't know it in English. It's like the metaphysics of the rebels, metaphysics of the ruins, or something like that. He mentions it's like metafísica de los escombros. I don't know how to say it in English because I haven't read the text in English, only in Spanish. But it's something like that. Like when right now, to the point that we are living in 2021, and when it was developed, this was developed in 2019, I believe, or 2018. But the idea is that in today's world, that all different political ideologies and political attempts of different political currents and so on, they already have been destroyed by the liberals, by the liberal unipolarity project, no? By the liberal worldwide system. So we take the more like we rescue the interesting things and the useful things from all different political experiences that we had in our country in order to build up something new and something around our Dasein, which is Peruvianness. So we take inspiration, for example, from Peruvian anarchism, from Peruvian socialism with Mariátegui and Aya de la Torre, and we also with Peruvian fascism, and other Peruvian nationalist experiences, like I mentioned, with Juan Velasco Alvarado, with also Juan Manuel Odría, and also and many other different political leaders that we have had and their ideas, and how we can, for example, take back some of these and place them in the 21st century in order to build up something new, something like that is going to be for Peruvians in 2021, and not for Peruvians in for example in 1980s or in the past century or whatever, or Peruvians in the future. No, it's for Peruvians for today. That's basically the idea that these ideas that we are developing. And it's not just me, it's not just Israel, it's Israelita. It's also we also have different people working around this in our Center for the Christolist Studies. That's how this think tank is called. By the way, right now it's just more focused and centered regarding academy and regarding academia and other more like let's say professional sphere, but we are thinking in making this a more let's say more street focused, more like more civilian oriented movement, perhaps in the coming future, perhaps in 2022, which is the coming year. Perhaps we are going to be holding, I don't know, rallies, meetings, or whatever can happen over the next year. So that's basically our plans, no, to expand this and not just remain as academia reply against this liberalization of Peruvian society, but also a more like trying to incorporate the over the everyday Peruvians, because otherwise we will be doing this just for us, just for our intellectual exercise, and that's not the idea. The idea is also this, to build up something for our society, to contribute to our future, because we also take ideas, for example, just like I mentioned, Professor Dugin, we also take this idea of Guion 5 of archaeofuturism, but we take that in the sense that we want to build up an alternative future, an alternative modernity, if it's possible, because right now we're living under the Western and liberal modernity. But could we, for example, have an archaic futurism? Could we have a Peruvian-oriented modernity, which is going to be more like focused and more profound on our roots, on our way of being, on our design? Perhaps that's the idea, no? So that's how I can sum up Chrysalism.
South America is in a very different reality from the one it was in during the Cold War, where the United States and the Soviet Union were fighting over every heart and mind on your continent there. But how has this affected perceptions of Russia? The loss in the Cold War, going from communism to capitalism. What are your guys' perspectives on Russia as it stands today? Or do people in your country just not think about Russia at all?
There is like two versions of that, because most Peruvians think that Vladimir Putin is a really it's a really good leader. It's just like, that's just not me. It's like you go to the comment section in different newspapers and they talk about Russia and about Putin. Of course, there are people that think that he's a corrupt leader and whatever, but there are also lots of Peruvians that said, no, I will wish for a Peruvian leader to be like Putin or something like that. So in that sense, Russia is present when we see the news and all that. But like in our everyday lives, it's like, no, we don't think that much about Russia. But regarding our perception, yes. Regarding the perception of Peruvians about the USSR and then Russia, well, it's interesting because the USSR did conduct the one and only. It's really funny when you think about it, but they conducted the one and only humanitarian mission for when we had an earthquake during I believe it was the late 70s and early 90s. Sorry, the late 70s and early 80s. They did conduct their one and only humanitarian mission here in Peru, and from then, I don't know why this happened, but the USSR had a soft spot for Peru. It's like, for example, Peruvians could go to the USSR without visa. We could go just with our passports, and today to Russia, we can still go to Russia with just our passports, and we don't need a visa or a working permit. I mean a visa or a special permit, like, for example, nations around Russia, like Lithuania or Latvia. They do need visa and a special permit to visit people in Russia. It's like we do not need that. This was mostly seen during the last World Cup that took place in Russia. Most Peruvians did go over there with just their passport and all that. So it's interesting that we have been considered by Russia to be I don't know if an interesting country perhaps, but in general, it's like Peruvians don't think that much about Russia and the Russian situation, but we do. For example, it would be more interesting if there will be more institutes that could teach us Russian, so we could understand and talk with the Russian people and so on. Because right now it's just the Russian embassy that sometimes they make classes for us to learn Russian, basic Russian or intermediate Russian. So that would be more helpful if the Russians would want to have a more direct treatment with Peruvians. That would be much more helpful. That, for example, that does happen in Argentina. I do see different institutions that do teach Argentinians the Russian language. That would be, yeah. I think that would be more helpful regarding that. So yeah, that's basically the Peruvian perspective on Russia.
Media like Fox News always brings up the point that a lot of Latinos are passionate about a sort of red revolution, be it true communism or some sort of communism light in the format of socialism, but a lot of them want to come to America for the wealth that America has, but the wealth that America has comes from capitalism. So one of the questions is, why do so few Latin American countries then advocate for capitalism at home? Wouldn't that be in their best interest?
Well, in the case of Peru, it's different because we had this internal conflict with a party named the Luminous Path, no? Sendero Luminoso, which is, I believe the United States knows a lot of this situation with Chairman Gonzalo, as he was called himself, the leader of this party, Abimael Guzman, that's his real name. They conducted a very crude and very, very brutal campaign against different Peruvian, different sectors of the Peruvian nation, of the Peruvian society. It wasn't just like, we are just championing for the poor and against the capitalist class and all that. That's not just how it happened. We have proof, we have different testimonies, we have photographic evidence, even film evidence that these men were actually always acting against different communities that didn't bend the knee to them. They were probably I would say they were closer to ISIS than they would be closer to, for example, the what was even the guys from Pol Pot. Yeah, those guys were preferable to the guys from Shining Path. I would go as far to say those guys would have been preferable to. It would have been better for the Peruvian society to have the Khmer, I believe it's Khmer Rouge or Khmer Rouge. I can't remember, but the guys from Pol Pot from Cambodia. Yeah, even those guys are nice compared to a Shining Path. But I don't know why America and people in the United States, the Americans, the people in the United States always seem to have a soft spot for this man and for the party. We have the evidence of different people supporting us. Freedom for Chairman Gonzalo, as if he was like a new Nelson Mandela or something like that. It's like, no, man. This guy is totally different. It's closer to, just like I mentioned, these guys were closer to ISIS, but instead of using Islam, they used communism to do their bidding. And even then, it wasn't just communism, because they just like in the case of ISIS, these guys always were killing people that they perceived to be infiltrators, in their mindset, But there were other communists that were killed by them, and there were different groups that were Marxist-Leninists, and they were purged by these men. There are also the people that, at the moment, I believe China was going through the Deng Xiaoping reforms. So they, I don't know what came to the minds of these people, but they did seem to think that it was a good idea to hang dogs, like random street dogs or dogs from that were pets for kids of a random block, to hang them with signs, saying that this will happen to all the the what was it? The word that they use? Reformist? No, the revisionist. Yeah, revision to Deng Xiaoping. This should happen to Deng Xiaoping and to all the revisionist dogs from China. No, you will hang and so. It's like, dude, you are fighting a war against a government, and you're like thinking about Deng Xiaoping. It's like, I don't know what's in your mind, to do that to a random street dog, just like. So these men are the reason why communism is not well seen in this country, because they use that and they took over the different communist organizations, except for one, but that one was also revolutionary, but they had a different view. They did believe in class warfare. They did attack only people from the higher societies, from the higher echelons of our society, from the upper class. Those guys who are from the MRTA, the Tupac Amaru revolutionary movement. Those guys had an alliance with them, no, but this alliance was just more like a spoken alliance, more than actual alliance, no, that we collaborate over here and there. It's like, no, we don't want to step on each other's toes. That was the difference, no. So that's the reason why Peruvians don't see communism in a positive way. Now, the issue with that we see today with our current government, with President Castillo, no, and his Peru Libre, Free Peru party. The issue with that is they did have a more let's say, they did focus their campaign more on on other provinces and not just the capital, and not just Lima, and it was due to so let's understand this. It was due to these previous governments that I mentioned that were hyper liberal, that this centralization of power became more prominent. No, for example, in the United States, you have a similar vision of that regarding California. The boomers call them California, no, and also, for example, in Seattle, no, that most of this thinking is centered, no, is centered around. But in the case of Peru, is more centered around the capital, and they did try to expand these ideas, no, to other provinces, and so these other provinces saw this as an attack from the capital against them, against their own way of living, and mostly the corrupt liberal politicians always treated people like trash. No, but it's not the plot twist is not just is that they did treat even people from the capital like trash, but the perception from the perception from the provinces, from the other cities outside of the capital is like, no, it's always the capital against us. We must defend them, and we must defend us against them. Is Peru against Lima? That's the way the narrative was being built up. So Pedro Castillo and the Peru and the Free Peru Party took over this idea, and started to make a campaign around that. To this day, even when he is failing regarding other issues that are not just taking control of, for example, from sections of different industries or from the economy, when he's failing, and other actions that are reflecting somewhat of a corrupt behavior, he's always saying, no, it's because it's always the capital against provinces. It's always the capital against Peru. It's against the rest of Peru. No? So that's how he became elected. No? The other half of that equation was that the person that he was going against was Keiko Fujimori, the daughter of Alberto Fujimori, which, again, I will mention this. He was one of the reasons why we became much more dependent uh, much more dependent from the United States. I am pretty sure that most Americans know about the shock doctrine regarding economics and finance. When you apply an economic shock to an entire to the entire economy of a country, like that happened also in Chile, for instance. That's a well known that's a well known economical doctrine from the 90s. And Fujimori was the reason why that happened. He made that to be our situation. So we sold most of our industries to mainly mainly companies from the United States. They did both. They did buy up land, buy up different, just like I mentioned, actions from companies that we had that were national companies. So he's the reason why we become more dependent from the United States. And her daughter was running against Castillo, so people decided, no, I would rather try with this guy than trying to replicate the shock doctrine with this woman. And she's also well known to be a corrupt politician. So it's like people not just voted in favor of Castillo, but also against Castillo. So we don't really have communism. No, it's as people from the United States would say. No, we have our own version of let's say a socialism, but it's not even then. It's not really that, because you don't have the conditions to apply different policies that Pedro Castillo and his Free Peru party would want.
So, as a Peruvian, what is your greatest national victory? What's your greatest national tragedy? And who is your national hero?
Okay, so this could depend on the period we are talking about. For example, we have from the period that when we were still a viceroyalty, we had different problems. When we became independent, we had also a lot of problems. And when we became when the hyper liberals took over the first time, which was called the aristocratic republic, which was basically like racist liberalism, let's say. It was really a horrible period. But I would say that our most remaining tragedy is still the conflict that we had with the Shining Path, because just like I mentioned, these guys were more like ISIS than the what was the I can't remember. Do you remember the name of the Ho Chi Minh, the group from Ho Chi Minh?
Wasn't that the Khmer Rouge? Yeah, no.
No, the Khmer Rouge
Oh
wasn't
no,
the
no, that was
Congo.
in
The Viet
Cambodia.
Cong, the Viet Cong,
Viet
the Viet
Cong, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. For example, leftists in other parts of the world think of Shining Path as if they were a Viet Cong, a patriotic, very fighting for the working class, fighting for the oppressed people. No, it's like, no. This again, I will say this again, and I need to make this clear. These people were like ISIS, but instead of using Islam, they used their own version of Maoism. But even then, when you read about Maoism, Mao talked about, for example, he talked about the national bourgeoisie, for example, the national developing national industry and all that, making an alliance with them against the forces of capitalism and all that. Is like that never, when you see the speeches and also the reading material of these groups, it's like they are not even Maoists. They are following their own thing, and their own thing is like I said, it's just like it's like trying to explain why they are acting the way they want to act, but it even fails. It even fails at that. It's like it's impossible to understand for a normal Marxist-Leninist, let's say, or for even a Maoist. Even when I did happen to meet Maoists, for example, from Chile or from Maoists from I don't know, Italy, and when I tried to explain, what this man, Chairman Gonzalo, was trying to say, is like they all like. Uh, they are all like shocked, like saying, what, I don't understand this. How is this Maoist? This doesn't make sense. That's what they tell me, and they say, yeah, and you see, it's not like you thought it was. It was totally different. And just like I mentioned, it's more closer to let's say to ISIS. You just replace ISIS with Maoism, which is not really Maoism. It even fails at that. So, from my perspective, those years, that period of violence in my country is one of the most tragic, tragic periods, tragic events in my country. We could talk about also the war against Chile that we lost, but that was because the country wasn't united. But this was, I believe, this is way more. This is way more tragic than that. So now, regarding our victory, I would say the war we had with Ecuador during 1941. So back then, what was happening in the world? The world had this the World War, no, Second World War, or as it is called in Russia, the Great Patriotic War. So over here, we had a limits conflict with border conflict with Ecuador, and so we declared war on them, and they declared war. No, first they declared war on us, and then we declared war on them. So we conducted the only other blitzkrieg seen in the world. We made a blitzkrieg, and in 1 week we managed to take them as to win the war against them, essentially, and take their capital, which is Quito. To take Quito, where we were marching on Quito within 1 week. I believe that's a great victory. Another great victory that I would say is also the victory that we had against the Shining Path. That would be one of that. I think that if I had to pick one of the two, I will pick the victory that we had against Ecuador in the 41, because it's very let's say we didn't have that many losses. We only notable losses. No, the only notable loss that we had was one of the best Peruvian pilots that he also became a national hero, which is Jose Abelardo Quiñones. And so when also the Peruvian airspace is called the Sky of Quiñones, due to this brave man and the sacrifice that he made during that war. No, so right now, talking about our national heroes, I believe that there is a split. There is a split between regarding myself between one of our most well-known national heroes for the international community is Miguel Grau. Miguel Grau was the captain of the Navy. We were fighting our war against Chile, and he captained this ship that was called the Huáscar. So it's very interesting because he did make us win many different naval battles, but we also lost him during the war. And he was a gentleman, because when he and his fleet, took down different different ships from Chile and all that, and find people in the waters that were Chileans. Most people wouldn't take prisoners, but he would instead take them as prisoners, but like but like let's say he was very he was a very he had very different very gentleman gestures with these men. For example, they would be able to write for their families, or for example, if they would also write he himself and different people from his fleet would write letters for the widows of the men that lost lives at sea, as a matter of respect between, as he said, honor between men, and he will send them to their widows in Chile. So he was a man's man. He was a gentleman overall, and I like that a lot about that man. But there is another man that in my opinion, is my favorite pick, which is Francisco Bolognesi. As you would, and people from the United States, Bolognesi is not a Spaniard or native last name. He was a descendant of Italians. This is an Italian last name. So he was already an old man from the retired military. So when our country, and again, this was also in the war against Chile. It's called the War of the Pacific. No? So when we had this issue with Chile, he didn't care that he was an old man. You know, he was still young in the spirit. He still managed to. He said he wanted to join the battle, and so he did. And he did command different people that were living in the different militias. They were more militias than just the army, because the army did send men, but just like I mentioned previously, the country politically was not united. We are totally breaking away in different cities. You know, different cities didn't want to send their own garrison. So that's so. Even in that very desperate situation, he still took command of the operations to defend our borders down the south. And he said one of the most epic lines in our entire Peruvian history, which he said the next thing: "I have sacred duties to fulfill, and I will see them through until I fire my last bullet." And so he did, even when he ran out of bullets during the battle in which he lost his life. He took out his saber and started fighting just with his saber, you know, up to the very end, to the very last moments. He didn't go down just like crying or being desperate, or just bending the knee to the enemy. He fought until his very last breath, and he was already a retired man. He could just, he even had money. So this also breaks the logic of the Marxists that say, no, if you're a wealthy person, well, the Peruvian Marxists, more like a Marxist from the world, Marxists from other parts of the world. It's that they say that no, if you have money, you don't have you don't really have a fatherland. You know, you are taking away the fatherland from the working class and all that. And he was the commander of the working class that were living over there. And even I would say that they were even lower than working class. They were peasant. There were a lot of peasants still during that time. And he became his commander. He became like the figure of I don't know, a commander of the Chinese Maoists, for example. They had the commanders of their own the commanders of their oppressed people from China. In this sense, he was the same, but for the desperate and oppressed people from Peru that were prey of the very corrupt politicians of the moment, that they didn't care that if the entire country was torched to the ground by the Chileans or by anyone else. They just wanted to have their own small and petty victories regarding politics and regarding their own for their own profit and for their own for their own sake. And there is also very important to note that here Francisco Bolognesi did send a letter to his wife that says he said no, he wasn't going to make it out, and he indeed wanted to fight this until his very end, and he said, I am very sorry that we are not going to die next to each other, but when duty calls, and always if like years ahead of my death, or even tomorrow, if the Peruvian government offers you some money in reparations for my service, don't accept them. Don't accept them. No, or make them donate those to charity or whatever, because I don't want that money, because this is my duty, and I am doing this for duty. Never take a single penny, never take a single coin. So then they will never be able to say that my duty had a price. That's why I like this man, and I believe that's the national hero that we have that represents me the most, because I'm very similar in that sense.